Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic night, that everyone is doing well, and I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that's been ongoing throughout the world, as you can obviously see on the map. There's just a ton of stuff happening in Ukraine. There's a ton of stuff happening internationally. We have all sorts of situations going on with the war on terror, humanitarian crises, the Horn of Africa, Pakistan, and other locations, Hurricane Ian cleanup, and of course the war in Ukraine and the geopolitical spectrum around that. So there's just a ton of relatively bad things that make the news. I mean, that's generally what the news gets made out of. And luckily here on the new news, you guys allow us to be the news that gives back, meaning that we're able to do some good with this project and help people throughout the globe deal with these crises that are affecting them so in a rather terrible fashion. And so we're never doing super chats on this channel. We're never pushing any kind of merchandising. In fact, we're never even going to be monetizing any of this stuff. 100% of everything we do is charity driven. 100% of everything we always will be doing will always be charity driven. So if you go and you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizations down there. All of them we have gone through and we have vetted ourselves to make sure that they are credible organizations and individuals that you can donate to, and that 80% or more of all the donations that those organizations and individuals do receive go directly to their programs, meaning they go directly to helping people throughout the entirety of the world. We are currently going through and vetting even more of these organizations that have been submitted by you guys as the viewers, and we highly encourage you to continue sending us even more as we continue looking through and trying to get even more of these organizations added on, so that way we can help even more people. And we're especially looking for areas and regions that we may not be covering at this moment. So if you have any more, please be sure to jump onto our Discord. The link's also in the description. And you can go and get in contact with the staff member and let any of us know. Give us a link and a short description of what that organization does. We'll get that vetting process started, and hopefully it will even get added here onto the stream. And with that, there's been a ton of different stuff ongoing throughout the news. It's just a ton of different stuff, and a lot of it has to deal with warfare and stuff that maybe you as a viewer might not be very familiar with, especially in a lot of aspects. You might have a lot of questions. Many of them can be very technical. Some of them a little bit broader. Either way, I'm very happy to answer them to the best of my ability. If you are watching with us live here in the live chat, I am watching that live chat, and I will be answering those questions that come through to the best of my ability. To give you a little bit of a background on me, a little bit of my credentials when it comes to this, I was an 0352 anti-tank missileman in the United States Marine Corps, serving with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines between 2016 and 2020. I did 2 tours to the Middle East. My first tour, I spent 4.5 months in Syria and a month and a half in Kuwait, where I was assisting with operations around Operation Inherent Resolve in the fight against the Islamic State, and that was in October of 2017 through March of 2018. In October of 2019 through March of 2020, I did my second tour to the Middle East, where I served with the Crisis Response Force as the team leader for their anti-tank, or as the team leader for their Javelin team, anti-tank team. And I actually oversaw anti-armor operations when I was one of the 100 Marines that went to the Baghdad Embassy complex there on those protests during January of 2020. And then I also trained Marines that were from Saudi Arabia that were getting ready to deploy to Yemen. And I also served, once again, with the Crisis Response Force out of Kuwait. So that was my background on that. I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. And I also am a fully cross-trained rifleman, fully cross-trained machine gunner, and a partially cross-trained radio operator. I'm also a CLS Marine as well. So if you guys have any questions on that kind of stuff, or really anything, I try to stay very well-rounded when it comes to the geopolitical spectrum and different situations happening throughout the globe and history. So I will try to answer other stuff outside of that as well to the best of my ability. But with anything, I always implore that you as the viewer, if you're interested in the topic and want to know more, please do your own research. And we also archive all of our maps. You can find them on our website, also listed in the description below. And you can click through any of these points, and if we have any additional information that goes with that we may not show on stream, you can go through and click on any of these points and go back through and do your own research with it as well and read more into it. And so with that, we go ahead and we jump right into the news, and we jump right down here into the into Ukraine, which is our special report for the night, of course. And we can see down here, this is in Kiev, where we see that $1.3 billion USD has been given to Ukraine through the International Monetary Fund and their executive board there. and that is supporting provisions for additional emergency funding to Ukraine under the Rapid Finance Instrument. And this is something that was posted by President Zelensky on his official Twitter today. So we can see that they are getting all of that stuff added, and they will be getting another $1.3 billion in emergency support to the country, which is fantastic to see. It's always good to see us continue to get more, or see Ukraine get more humanitarian aid and get more funding, because they still also have to run a government as well. I mean, just because the war's ongoing doesn't mean everything else has been deferred. The general livelihoods of the government also have to run as well. And when most of your focus is on the war itself and having to win that, then some of that stuff, I mean, you're coming up lacking in some other areas financially, and hopefully that this will be able to help with many of those areas where they are really seeing some difficulty. But as we continue through here in Kyiv, we really do not get a whole lot of other uplifting information. Unfortunately, something else President Zelensky said today was about the forced deportation of individuals. So, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian aggressors have forcibly deported more than 1.6 million Ukrainian citizens to the Russian Federation. Once again, under the 1949 Geneva Conventions, and I highly implore you to go read them. They're listed in the databases of the United Nations on their official website. The transfer of forcible deportation and transfer of civilians is actually a war crime under the Geneva Conventions, and each one of those 1.6 million individuals is one count in the International Criminal Court. So that is 1.6 million counts, charges of forced deportation and war crimes under the Geneva Convention. We also get a child casualty update. This coming from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 418 Ukrainian children have died. 789 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region, and that is very understandable. We see that's where the majority of where the kinetic and very bitter, atrocious combat is taking place is in the Donetsk area, and that's where most of the fighting has been ongoing for the past 8 years as well. This is only counting since February 24th, but you have to imagine the fighting has been going on there, even though it was much more of a stalemate before the invasion and has been for some time now. This is where some of the most kinetic fighting is taking place, some of the most brutal fighting, and this is a war of attrition, meaning it's meant to grind down your opponent, and both sides are trying to bleed each other dry at this point. And we're seeing quite a high significant number of civilian casualties, especially in that and amongst children, which are still there. And we do know that there are missing children ranging of about 200 plus right now, moving towards 250, and over 7,000, almost 8,000 Ukrainian children have been taken from Ukraine and taken to Russia. Both of those statistics coming from the Commissioner for Human Rights for Ukraine. It's also been a war on education, as was reported by Elena Zelenska, the First Lady of Ukraine today. And she said, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian occupiers have destroyed 150 and damaged 900 Ukrainian schools. And that does go to show a lot of these schools have been completely damaged and or destroyed. We've shown a significant number of them here. And that is... You have to understand that this war, we haven't been reporting for the entire duration of the war as we were working on other projects, most of us. And so the large number of the regions in the north that we haven't reported on directly here were also damaged and or destroyed. And we see significant numbers of that in the Kiev Oblast, Chernihiv Oblast, Sumy Oblast, Kharkiv Oblast, and other places all throughout Ukraine. And it's not just these... it's not just these facilities. You also have to understand that medical facilities, which are explicitly, as well as schools, which are also explicitly stated as not being a military target under the Geneva Conventions, have been highly targeted, and many of them have actually been confirmed by the WHO as well. So we know that there's no regard regarding what protected locations are within the Geneva Conventions to the Russian Federation. There's no regard between what is a valid and invalid target for the Russian troops, and we see that time and time and time again, some of which we will actually get into here as we continue to report. And that immediately picks up here in Kharkiv as we begin to move our way down and into the front lines and into where the kinetic parts of this war are ongoing. We're seeing that Russian forces are striking at downtown Kharkiv with missiles. Kharkiv Mayor Ihor Terakov reported that Russia targeted downtown Kharkiv, hitting a hospital early on October the 8th. So just this night, it's a situation currently ongoing. The building caught fire. There is no information on casualties at this time. So as we were saying, right now we do not know any casualties or what exact building had been damaged outside of it being a hospital. And this is coming directly from the Kiev Independent and our good friends such as Ilya Ponomarenko. And some of those hospitals were actually given were given generators to continue running and to improve quality of life and the ability to treat patients just here in the last roughly 48 hours. Quote, two medical facilities in Kharkiv, the Emergency Aid and Disaster Medicine Center, along with number 17 Municipal Clinical Multi-Profile Hospital, received diesel-electric generators this summer under a project funded by the Ukraine Humanitarian Fund, or UHF, and implemented by UNOPS, or UN Office of Project Services. And if you want more information on that, then feel free to go to reliefweb.international and also the UN's organization there in Ukraine. The rocket attacks do continue throughout the rest of the Kharkiv Oblast. And, quote, rocket attacks on the Chuihiv, Kupiansky, and Izium districts in Kharkiv region on October the 6th. 8 people were injured. All injured victims are in moderate condition. In addition, one woman was blown up by a Russian mine. That's coming from Oleh Subinov, the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. Something that's very important to note, and something that is going to be impacting Ukraine very long and far into the future, is unexploded ordnance and mines. Both Russia and Ukraine, neither of them are signatories to the Ottawa Convention, meaning anti-personnel mines and many other types of mines and cluster munitions that are other countries see as banned or do no longer use, especially if they're signatories of the Ottawa Convention or observe it, regardless of being a signatory, are still in fair play by both sides in this war, as long as they are used in ways that do not violate the Geneva Conventions or their protocols. And so both sides have used mines quite extensively, mostly for area denial throughout the country, as well as just being able to be used for ambushes. But also the immense amount of artillery that has been used in this conflict is very akin to that of World War I. These battlefields, especially when you get to the south, really look more like the battlefield of the Somme or Verdun or any places in Flanders, Passchendaele Ridge. These are much more akin to World War I battlefield conditions than it really is to what you would expect out of a 21st century modern war where technology has developed so significantly. But it's really the same issues. It's really the same issues of war has advanced to become so much more deadly than what anyone really has realized. That has forced it into static fighting and high attrition rates. And also you're talking about a very highly artillery-focused war, long-range fires and indirect fires on targets, and now we also see precision fires, of course, with things like the Mars 2, which is the M270 system donated by Germany, or also the HIMARS system, which has gained so much notoriety throughout this war and has really been the game changer in this war for Ukraine. But these rounds, a lot of the mud, especially early on in the war, and as we get ready to roll here and into the winter, it's already begun to set in parts of Ukraine. It is now that rainy season. And before the ground freezes over, but as the summer has ended, and also before the summer began back in February, March, and April, we see what's called the Rasputitsa. The Rasputitsa is this really, really muddy condition inside Ukraine that quite literally swallows tanks up and bogs them down. Well, this super soft mud and earth that is throughout this very agricultural region in the Western European plain, we see what ends up happening is that not only does it bog these tanks down, but a lot of these warheads, the way that they end up detonating these artillery rockets, whether you're talking to BM-21 Grad with the Katyushas, or you're talking about any of the other wide variety of equipment and artillery being used, they detonate via a crush switch, meaning they hit a hard object, it crushes the forward end of that projectile, and that actually sets off the detonation of the weapon system. It takes nothing but a fraction of a second to do all of that, but these rounds are landing in this very, very soft mud. It's not very hardened at all with the Rasputitsa, and they're quite literally just hitting the ground, and they're not detonating. These are live rockets. They're ready to go off at any point in time. Many of them, if they're coming from Russian stockpiles, are likely unstable, as they have not been kept very, very well. And so there's just a ton of unexploded ordnance between mines, booby traps, and just unexploded shells and munitions just scattered across the landscapes and dug into the ground all throughout these agricultural regions, and that will lead to civilian casualties long and far into the future. The last casualties of this war could easily be 100 years from now, and that is not a joke. So this is quite a significant issue, and once again, one woman was killed by a mine just in the past 48 hours on October the 6th, actually, according to Ole Subinov. So we will continue to see, unfortunately, those casualties, and likely we'll see a lot of them being, unfortunately, children who simply do not comprehend the grave risk that these items pose long and far into the future. Today, along the Kharkiv front, we saw Ukrainian troops were entering Hlushkivka, which is just to the south of Kupiansk, and we see that they are pushing into this region. We've watched them as the Ukrainian forces have pushed north. Last time we saw them, they were in Borova and pushing up north along the river. This is the Oskil River, really separates two halves of the Kharkiv Oblast, well, really the last third or quarter of the Kharkiv Oblast, but this is a sign that they're really mopping up the resistance along this river as Russian lines continue to fold. They are still breezing through this area, and they're still breezing through all of these areas. They're cleaning up, of course, whatever resistance is left, but really the Russian lines are collapsing in several different points in this war, and we'll get to a little bit more of that here in a second. But we do see them pushing in here. This is Hlushkivka here in the Kharkiv Oblast. Sorry, unfortunately, it does have that copyright music, so I can't play the sound that goes along with this. But they are on the move, joyfully, of course. Now, I'm sure that we'll continue to see, significant successes as this continues over the next few days. They really have not really lost any significant momentum, but we do know that they have kind of shifted their objectives, at least from what we're noticing. Ukrainian forces have shifted their objectives throughout the duration of this campaign. And so they're just kind of walking through here, talking with civilians who, of course, come out to greet them. This really is an indicator that these Ukrainian civilians really coming out and talking to these guys and being very open about their liberation really indicate that Russian forces, while Ukrainian forces are just now pushing into this area, Russian forces likely have abandoned these positions. And it's very likely that this little point up here that we have kind of jettisoning out from the rest of the main front here, it's very likely that Russian forces have also withdrawn out of the area as well. Zach Jeffers, do you have NAFO merch? I do have NAFO merch. I have a NAFO sweatshirt now, which is what I'm wearing, and I have this wonderful mug that I bought because NAFO expansion is non-negotiable. As we move south, and we're still kind of staying in this area right here on the border between the Kharkiv and the Luhansk Oblast. From the NAFO guys? Yes, you can go and get some from St. Javelin if you want. They have an entire section dedicated to it. But yes, it's all NAFO. I am wearing NAFO things. And then I have my prior St. Javelin shirts underneath this. Anyway, over here in Zavote, which is here it's a major city here along the border of the Luhansk and Kharkiv Oblast. Zavote is a rather strategic city here on this section of the front lines. And Russian reinforcements are currently rushing to Zavode in a bid to try and stop the rather sweeping counteroffensive within this region. Russian forces reportedly digging into defensive positions in and around the city and rushing in a massive number of troops as they are trying to see if the quantity over quality really works overall. As we have seen, that usually is not the case, but at this point, Russia is relatively desperate, trying to stop these significant gains by the Ukrainian forces and try and stall them in any way they can. We likely will not see any successes on that, but they are going to try nonetheless, and we do see them moving here. Take a look. So these are Russian forces here moving in the middle of the night to Zavode. There on the border between the Luhansk and the Kharkiv Oblasts. And Delta Aviation 23 asked, did you hear that Russia stole India tanks? I've heard a little bit about that. I haven't heard extensive. My understanding is that these were tanks originally intended to be delivered under a defense pact or under a defense contract from Russian manufacturers to India, which is very common. I mean, that's something that in the United States, everyone does this. It's a defense contract, and there's a lot of legal steps that have to go through. But the T-72, the T-55, T-62s, all this stuff has been sold to other countries in numbers that are insane. It's absolutely insane, the number of countries that use the T-72 and other main battle tanks that are designed by other countries. Even Egypt uses the Abrams tank. And the United States is known as being the users of the Abrams. You think in Abrams, you only think of the United States. That's not true at all. Other countries use them as well. Leopards as well. You know, Poland has an entire fleet of Leopards, as does Germany, who is the developer of both the Leopard 1 and the Leopard 2. In fact, you can even, if you are a nation in the market, you can even go and buy the Merkava series, which is produced by Israel. It's just that, despite being considered one of the best tanks, if not the best tank in the world, the Merkava is simply too costly for many countries, and they don't quite have the same production capability to produce large numbers of that fleet. But yes, India is supposed to... Yeah, so India basically sent... He says that basically what happened, India sent tanks to Russia to be refitted, then Russia instead sent them to Ukraine. 100% can see that happening. Once again, never trust the Russians. I don't know on if anyone on the face of this planet now hasn't figured that part out, but nobody trusts the Russians. It's just not a smart political decision. Moving down here, so the last time we reported on the counteroffensive here, kind of in the Luhansk Oblast, is kind of pushing into the Luhansk. We saw that Ukrainian forces were had reached the outskirts and were, posing outside the sign here in Kharkivka. Now we know that they have actually made it over to here. This is in Makivka, which has been declared liberated here in the Luhansk Oblast. So we are seeing successes as Ukrainian forces are actually driving deeper into Russian lines. And we can see them starting to push here rather significantly into the Luhansk Oblast and making some rather meaningful gains here. Take a look. Of course, it has that copyright music, but yeah, so they're, of course, making sure that their boots are nice and clean here. And, by the way, that flag isn't really useful anymore. There is no LPR anymore, according to Russia, so... Nuclear coming out. Nuclear says, nonsense, our tanks are the best. We even have an escape pod for the turret crew. As we continue south here, we see that Ukrainian soldiers encountered a checkpoint as they were moving through the Donetsk Oblast here. So it's pretty sweet interaction. I thought it was I thought it was a little uplifting, and it does have some subtitles here for you guys. So take a look. This is Ukrainian soldiers getting stopped at a checkpoint.
Так, проезжаем самых серьезных патриотов Украины, блокпост. Самый сильный блокпост Донецкой области. Конечно. Самым лучшим патриотом. Слава Україні! Дай конфету.
А ну, хлопці, пропуск дайте. Вот такий пропуск, правильно? Да?
Все. На здоров'я, рости здоровий.
А що це означає?
Мисливець на орків. Да.
А хочете в одну ігру цікаво пограти? Недовго.
А ну давай.
Ви повинні відгадати, яке число я загадав.
А ну давай.
Я загадав.
Загадав?
А від
Так!
Ха, я виграв.
Мені 7 років.
Бачиш, як я знаю. А знаєш чого? Я дядько Мольфар, я все знаю.
А, давайте тепер я.
А ну давай.
Загадали?
Так, звісно.
14?
А як ти вгадав?
Я не знаю.
Капець. Молодець, ну дай 5, брат. Дайте. Все, все буде хорошо, все буде окей. Молодець.
Все, рости здоровий. До побачення. Дякую.
So, sweet kid there. And running his own little checkpoint. It's always cool to see that kind of stuff. Well, we needed a little bit of an uplift because the next news coming out of the Lyman area is not so uplifting. The exhibitions do continue here in Lyman, as the bodies of at least 50 and upwards of Ukrainian civilians that were killed under Russian occupation currently continues. Some of those killed are less than a year old. All of whom were killed, once again, under Russian occupation. That's still ongoing by the local authorities there. Some reportedly bear signs of torture, and some entire families were killed. Quote, as of October the 7th, 60 dead bodies of Ukrainian civilians killed by Russian occupiers have been found in the liberated city of Lyman in the Donetsk region. And that's coming from Denis Monastyrski, the Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. We can see some of these graves here and the excavation work that is continuing. As we move further down into the Donetsk region, we get our daily Donetsk update coming from Pavel Krylenko. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on October the 5th. 14 people were killed and 3 citizens were injured. Once again, coming from Pavel Krylenko, who is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. Down here in Mariupol, we have some interesting news coming out. Resistance movements continue throughout the entirety of the occupied areas. Mariupol is one of those that we haven't seen a whole lot coming from the resistance, mostly because there's not exactly a whole lot left in Mariupol. Regardless, however, the people are fighting back. The resistance movement in Mariupol reportedly set fire to Russian officers' quarters there in the city of Mariupol, according to Petro Andrushenko, who is the advisor to the mayor of Mariupol. And we actually do have a video coming out of the city of the fire. Take a look. So not a long video, but a video nonetheless of the fire ongoing there in Mariupol. Reportedly, resistance members set fire to Russian officers' quarters there in Mariupol as part of their resistance. In Huliopol, just across the border from the Donetsk Oblast in the ZAPORIZHZHIA Oblast, we see large explosions are occurring outside of Huliopol as the fighting continues to rage across the entirety of the front lines. We do have some photographs coming out today of some of those rather large explosions ongoing just outside the city. Now, Huliopol does lie along the front lines here, at least to the best of our knowledge, so we are going to see significant amounts of explosions and artillery usage in and around this area, as both Russian and Ukrainian forces are simply trying to hold the line there. But we also know that a Ka-52 was reportedly downed, at least according to the Ukrainian Air Force. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine shot down a Russian helicopter Ka-52 in the south of Ukraine on October the 7th. The Ka-52 is a tandem main rotor aircraft known for its speed and agility that was developed by the Russian forces. Quite a significant number of them have been shot down through the durations of the war. We do know that the Ka-52 Alligator, which is the designation by NATO, has a very limited production cycle, and it's very hard to believe that they aren't running low on numbers as of yet. 3 Russian missiles were downed today. Quote, on October the 7th, Ukrainian Air Defense Forces shot down 3 Russian missiles in the Zaporizhzhia region. That's calling from Alexander Staruk, the head of the Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration. But we do know what those missiles were likely headed as we roll into Zaporizhzhia, as there appears to have been a massacre in Zaporizhzhia. The apartments in downtown Zaporizhzhia were struck with missiles very early this morning and late last night. 7 S-300 missiles, modified to hit ground targets, were used against the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhzhia, there in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, where the missiles slammed into the apartment buildings filled with sleeping Ukrainian civilians. So far, at least 11 people have been killed, with another 21 being pulled from the rubble. These are from the strikes when they hit initially last night. Entire apartment buildings collapsed instantly. It's coming from Dmytro Kuleba, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Ukraine. As that apartment building this morning after the sun had risen. You can see rescue workers continuing and also fighting that blaze and continuing to try and pull people out from the rubble. Once again, at least 21 people were pulled out of the rubble. So this is a man's apartment. This is from one of the men that lived inside of one of these apartment buildings that was struck last night, and we could see the destruction from the inside to an extent. He's a little cut up and everything, but walking around, and it's just trashed. I mean, the entire section has collapsed in. I mean, it's blowing everything out. Ervis says, and winter is coming. Exactly, and winter is coming. And I must warn you as the audience for this next photo. This is a little bit more graphic than what I would normally show here. But it really illustrates what Russia does in this war. This war is unfathomable in its scope and ferocity really in the last 80 years. It's not really anything that we've seen quite like it. We've seen small bits and pieces of really horrendous fighting, but this is a significantly more kinetic war, and it's a total disregard in the Geneva Conventions when it comes onto the part of the Russian forces. So while this photo may be a little bit more graphic than what I normally would show, this really illustrates, this picture is priceless. It doesn't just speak 1,000 words. It is absolutely priceless in really illustrating the Russian way of fighting a war. That is how Russia fights its wars. She was unable to be saved. But that is how Russia fights its wars. The S-300 is a surface-to-air missile battery that was designed by the Russians. They're not intended to hit military. They're not intended to hit ground targets, but they were modified because they were running out of the Iskander-M and caliber cruise missiles. This entire apartment building collapsed on top of her from a Russian missile strike into downtown Zaporizhzhia. That is how Russia fights its wars. This is a very blatant violation of the Geneva Conventions and all of their protocols, as is many of the other strikes. See, we simply got a photo with this one. Many of them, they're too horrendous to show. Keep in mind, you as a viewer only see between 10 to 25% of what we have and what we see every single day. The violence and the gore is just too significant to put on any kind of platform, and I don't think we should be putting on any kind of platform. But this war is absolutely horrendous. And it's costing civilians quite dearly. The Russians do not follow the Geneva Conventions. They never will. And this war only continues to illustrate that as it continues. Once again, in the belief of this channel, this war is a genocide done very poorly. However, even a genocide done very poorly still comes with significant costs. And many of that is in blood, in lives. Let's come down here to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant located in Enerhodar. We see a power line was damaged again after shelling took place. Shelling damaged the power line providing electricity to the reactor unit 6 at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, or ZNPP, on 10/6, forcing the unit to temporarily rely on its emergency diesel generators instead. Director General Grossi was in Kyiv on 10/6, briefing President Vladimir Zelensky of the situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the International Atomic Energy Agency's proposal to set up a nuclear safety and security protection zone around the facility. The director is planning to travel to the Russian Federation early next week for further consultation on the plan, with the aim to agree and implement it as soon as possible. If you want some more information on that, you're more than welcome to go and visit reliefweb.international. So we move into the Kherson Oblast. We see that down here in Novokakhovka, large convoys were spotted in Novokakhovka as Russian forces are continued to see that their flank is collapsing. The entire Russian right flank has completely rolled, and Ukrainian forces continue to press their way deeper and deeper into previously Russian-occupied territory, and liberating the entirety of the Kherson Oblast is quite a significant and achievable objective, according to most experts internationally and in Ukraine. And we're seeing that Russia is dedicating a large amount of metamaterial to try and sharpen up the defense. However, it appears that many of these likely will not be making them to their target, as logistical lines are essentially completely cut. And this photo is coming out of Novokakhovka as of today. And we can hear those results coming from the Ukrainians, just how successful this counteroffensive has been. Quote, as of October the 6th, the armed forces of Ukraine have liberated 29 Ukrainian settlements in the Kherson region from Russian occupiers. That's coming from Alexei Haramov, who is the deputy head of the main operational director of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. That guy's title needs an acronym. We see yet another one getting added to the list. And we can see that this is Tryfonivka, located here in the Kherson Oblast. It appears that it has also been liberated as Russian lines continue to collapse. Which, unfortunately, it would appear it has that copyright music. But you see them raising the flag here. So indicating and yet another Ukrainian settlement has been successfully liberated here in the Kherson Oblast. Always good to see. And that blue marker there indicates that this is the administrative building for the city. So normally they'll only raise the flag over the administrative building once it has been successfully declared liberated. And so, but yes, that is Tryfonivka there in the Kherson Oblast. That has been, so it has been successfully liberated. This continues to push down, as you may remember, they're kind of up here. This is over by Novovoskreninski, in Petropavlovka. We do know that they were there earlier, so we're seeing quite a significant movements here in the Kherson Oblast, and more territory taken. So as we move over here and into Odessa, we have a couple of updates. This is a long road to recovery. This is Andrei Sobokovsky, who is 19 years old. He served in Odessa. After a strike, both of his legs were injured and had to be amputated. The Life-Saving Center brought him to Kyiv and helped him get prosthetics and go through physical and psychological rehabilitation. It is a long road to recovery, but he seems to be in rather good spirits.
Так, у нас Андрей уже потихоньку ходит. Хлопці, це ваша машина? Щас, 2 хвилини. Так.
And so that is the long road to recovery there coming out of Odessa. And it's good to see that he is getting some support and he's getting some of those things that he needs, including prosthetics, which is pretty amazing to see. Another good set of news is coming out of the Odessa area when it comes to the grain corridor, which we have another update today. Quote, on October the 7th, 3 more ships left the Ukrainian ports Odessa, Chernomorsk, and Pivdeny through the grain corridor. 56,600 tons of Ukrainian wheat and corn are on board, heading in countries of Africa, Asia, and Europe. And that's coming from the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine. And inside Ukraine, that is actually all of the news. But that doesn't mean that that's all of the news for the night, because there is a ton of stuff happening other places throughout the world, much of which actually has to deal with the ongoing conflict. And so while we wrap up Ukraine here, meanwhile in Russia, it would appear that while en route to the front lines to drop off some ammunition, a load of S-300 missiles was dumped onto the side of the road. Take a look.
Чуть-чуть груз вывалился в кольцо с телеги.
No, this is not like a military transporter, by the way. Like, this guy is just like an average truck driver that they found somewhere in Russia, and they're like, hey man, you're going to take these really explosive missiles somewhere. Apparently didn't bother to strap them down at all. And by the way, these are live missiles. These are live missiles. Oh, hell no. You think... I would shit myself. Hands down. I could not imagine... I've seen a lot of things happen. I've even seen trucks, like military trucks, on their side sometimes. Like, I've seen, the military in the United States, it's a fair amount of rollover accidents, even on, like, regular highways. I remember one time I was going down to just, like, going down to, like, Palm Springs or something. And I just passed, it was just a Marine Corps truck, and it was just on its side because it took a turn too fast. And I was like, huh, that's kind of funny. But but most of the time we're not carrying like massive amounts of like ammunition or anything, and it's not like it's like a military, it's not a military truck. This guy's just an average truck driver. Like, he's just your average. He doesn't have an escort. He doesn't have anything. He's just towing very badly. Didn't strap it down or anything. That man did not ratchet strap it and said, "Ha, that thing's not going anywhere." And it just tips over. Nope. No, thank you. So meanwhile in Russia, they're not able to even get their missiles to the front lines. Max said out for delivery. Well, if I know anything about shipments, that's going to be delayed. Meanwhile, in Moscow, a car explodes near Federation Tower. 2 cars are on fire near the Federation Tower. Eyewitnesses say they heard an explosion, after which they noticed a man running away with a canister. According to the source, the Jaguar was the first to catch fire. The car exploded, causing a nearby car to catch fire. As a result of the incident, no people so far were injured.
Но это не рядом.
Вот так они горят уже 5 минут. Пожарные оперативные. Сначала взорвалась вот эта и загорелась соседняя.
So Nuclear on our channel is an individual who has pretty interesting sense of humor, because he makes quotes, and these quotes are kind of funny, because it's all coming from Private is, I was told we were fighting NATO and Nazis, but all around I see just trees. Why do the trees speak? Well, Private Conscriptovich has been officially promoted, it would seem, due to the massive amounts of losses and the complete loss of his entire platoon up there in Ukraine. So he's now been promoted to Lieutenant Conscriptovich. Hey, what a lovely day moving alongside the tank. Wait, what's that sound? If you ever have a chance to come out here and be with us live, Nuclear's sense of humor is quite on par. Where's fire and cops? Says Sci-Fi. I think all the police got conscripted. They're on their way to Ukraine right now, or would be should they have gotten food and weren't slowly starving to death on the side of a railroad tracks. All the firefighters were conscripted too. You were conscripted, they're just waiting to give your notice to you. And so, as we move on into the rest of Europe, up here in Finland, Finland actually made a ton of socks for people. The Finnish people knitted over 20,000 pairs of socks for Ukrainian soldiers. Some donations were packed with other things, according to the organizer, Delia Strasveska. Woo! 20,000 pairs of socks just in time for the winter. That's pretty awesome. And she's getting ready to deliver them. Down here in Prague, the Finnish Prime Minister, which was here at Prague Castle, the Finnish Prime Minister, Marin Sana, was asked on the way to the EU summit what was the way out of the conflict, to which the minister responded, the way out of the conflict is for Russia to leave Ukraine. That's the way out of the conflict. Very, very blatant as to the stance of the Finns on how this war ends.
Way out of the conflict.
Way out of the conflict. The way out of the conflict is for Russia to leave Ukraine. That's the way out of the conflict. Thank you.
Another fabulous mic drop. And in Paris, France is enacting funds to facilitate weapons delivery to Ukraine. France created the 100 million euro or $98 million fund that would allow Ukraine to directly buy weapons and other necessary materials to counter Russia's war. French President Macron reported that discussions were being held, particularly with Denmark, to deliver more highly accurate Caesar truck-mounted artillery guns to Ukraine. You see this coming from the Kiev Independent. And also, if you want to check more out on that, you can read that article by France24, who is one of the main reporters there in Europe. And as we kind of move into here, we jump just across the Strait of Gibraltar there into Morocco before we move over into the Middle East, where 12 suspected Islamic State supporters were arrested during a counterterrorism operation there in Melilla in Granada. Security forces detained 12 people suspected of having links with the Islamic State. 8 detainees were taken into custody. Among them were 2 women who, according to investigators, were engaged in the production of propaganda materials and the distribution among young people through social media networks. Also, jihadist supporters were engaged in recruiting recruits into the ranks of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. The security forces noted that the group was organized and supervised by people who had a criminal record for crimes of a terrorist nature. It's not the only counterterrorism operation up here in Al-Hasaka province here in northern Syria. The boys are still at it up there in Operation Inherent Resolve, along with our coalition partners. A counterterrorism operation was carried out against the Islamic State in the night between the 5th of October and 6th in northern Syria. The forces of the international coalition, led by the United States, carried out a counterterrorism operation against the Islamic State in the province of Al-Hasaka. The target of the special forces of the U.S. Armed Forces was a certain Abu Hail, who allegedly was an active participant in the MTO. During the shootout, the man was eliminated, so he was killed, and 2 more were wounded and 2 were detained. It is noteworthy that the operation took place in the territories controlled by the government troops near the city of El Kamishli. It is reported that the Americans detained 12 more Syrian troops who tried to prevent the landing of American troops from helicopters. After the raid was over, they were released. And we do that. So that is the... So that's the target. Yes, he is a target. He's also a dead target, and there is the statement coming from the United States Central Command. So the boys still going out there doing raids up there in Al-Hasaka province. Great to see. Great to see they're still getting some up there. And we will detain other nations' forces. This is something, I don't think we had to do it when we raided Osama bin Laden's compound, but they definitely will. They'll go and they'll raid, and if another country's like forces try to intervene in a special forces raid, we'll just detain them. We'll be like, yep, no interference. And so that way they can't get away and like tell anybody else what's happening. Yeah, they'll just detain them right then and there, and then they'll, like, everyone will be off the birds, and the last like 5 guys would go, and they'll just like cut their restraints and just leave. Because we have these things, they're called flex cuffs. Super Seamster Swing Show. He says, hey, from Bakersfield. Hey, what's up? Unknown people attempted to kill a former head of intelligence in Iraqi Kurdistan up here in Erbil. Militants attempted to assassinate the former head of intelligence in combating terrorism in the province of Nineveh under the political party Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. A man was fatally wounded when an IED attached to the bottom of a car exploded on a street in Erbil. The women and children who were in the cabin were hospitalized. Their lives are not in danger. No one has yet taken responsibility of the attack, so it looks like they were just mildly injured but survived. But there was an IED strike here in Erbil. You can see a result of some of that. So a failed assassination there, and I accidentally just clicked off, and you can see it's left there of the car. You can see where it blew over the fence there and into the compound wall. So, attempted assassination attempt there in Erbil. Down here in Pakistan, it is a humanitarian crisis. So in Pakistan, Pakistan's floods sunk $9 million into poverty. Pakistan's floods sunk 9 million people into poverty. 1,700 were found dead and 12,867 injured since June. 33 million are still affected in 84 districts of Pakistan. There's an emergency need for humanitarian aid, and hunger and mental health crisis have been reported. The standing stagnant water led to malaria, cholera, and dengue outbreaks. The United Nations the UN has said that there's an urgent need. They're currently seeking for $65.8 million USD to help more than 650,000 refugees and a number and members of their host communities affected by the recent devastating floods. And this is coming from Antonio Guterres, who is the head of the United Nations. He's Secretary General of the United Nations. Pakistan is on the verge of a public health disaster, and severe hunger is spiking. While the rains may have ceased, the effects on the floods will linger for years to come. I urge donors and relevant organizations to support rehabilitation and reconstruction efforts. UNFPA are also reporting on the situation. If you want more information from that, you can check out any of these links. We have it coming from the UNHCR. We also have it from Arab News there in Pakistan, the government link from Pakistan, as well as the Japan Times. Down here in Thailand, a former police officer killed 35 at a children's daycare center. A former police officer opened fire at a daycare center in Thailand, killing at least 35 people, at least 23 of them being children. After the attack, the gunman went home and killed his wife and child, and then he killed himself. The attacker, armed with a shotgun, pistol, and knife, began a killing spree in Nong Bom Long, Bao Long Phu province at about 12:30 p.m. local time or 1:30 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday before fleeing the scene in a pickup truck. The attacker was named as a former police officer, Panay Kambarab, 34, and he was dismissed from the force last year for drug use. That is the perpetrator of the attack. This is coming from UNICEF in Thailand regarding this. This is their official statement. And they said the UNICEF is saddened and shocked by the tragic shooting incident at an early childhood development center in Thailand's northern province of Nong Bao Lamphu, where dozens of people were reportedly killed, many of them young children. UNICEF condemns all forms of violence against children. No child should be a target or witness of violence anywhere, anytime. Early childhood development centers, schools, and all learning spaces must be safe havens for young children to learn, play, and grow during their most critical years. UNICEF sends its heartfelt condolences and deepest sympathies to the families who lost loved ones and the injured. We join all people in Thailand in mourning and hope that those affected receive appropriate and timely support. We also ask that members of the community and the media refrain from posting or forwarding images and videos related to this violent incident, as this may further negatively impact children, victims' families, and their loved ones. If you want more information on that, you can check out the article by Al Jazeera. Down here in Africa, we start off our report here in the Tigray region of Ethiopia, where a drone attack has left 6 people dead. A drone attack there in the Dangolat town, 30 kilometers from Mekelle and Zana and Agabi on Friday, left 6 dead and at least 80 people wounded. Some in critical condition. Mekelle Hospital says that it received over 80 casualties, with 42 of them referred to Aidar Referral Hospital. We can see the Ethiopian Red Cross Society responding to that. Some of the injured. Further injured. And as this conflict continues, and as allegations of ethnic cleansing on multiple fronts here in the Tigray region continue, the humanitarian crisis is of the region, and there's an urgent need for aid. Babies in Ethiopia's Tigray region are dying in the first month of life at 4 times the rate before the war cut off access to most medical care for over 5 million people. Women are dying during pregnancy or within 42 days of giving birth at 5 times the rate before the war, and children under the age of 5 are dying at twice the pre-war rate, often because of easily preventable reasons. Patients are dying at hospitals lacking medications and with broken machines, almost no reagents left to perform even basic tests. And sterilization process of surgical equipment was compromised due to rolling power cuts. Aidar Hospital reported that there are 26,768 diabetic patients in Tigray, of which 16,420 are type 1 diabetes. 8,224 are children under the age of 14. The total they are totally insulin dependent. Not a vial of insulin is available. 12 diabetic patients are dying every single week. The World Health Organization called for a sustained passage to deliver health supplies to the area, as there has been no humanitarian road or air access for 6 continuous weeks. 90% of the Tigray region in Ethiopia requires humanitarian assistance in order to survive. 1.8 million children in the Tigray region alone are more than likely at risk of severe malnutrition, meaning life-threatening malnutrition within this region. We come from the World Health Organization's official Twitter regarding the health situation in Ethiopia. Also coming from Idar Hospital, their official statement. If you want more on this, both the Associated Press and the Telegraph there in the United Kingdom have more articles on this. But the situation in Ethiopia is quite severe, more severe than what we would consider many other crises to be, even when you're regarding just their scale. The Tigray region of Ethiopia is rather especially horrendous, especially considering this region lies within the Horn of Africa, which is also on top of this conflict. Already it was a humanitarian disaster. The conflict has flared up again, creating even more of a humanitarian disaster and bringing an ethnic cleansing into the issue. And also, it's this area of the country, this area of the world is suffering the worst drought in 40 years. So it's just compounding issues upon top of compounding issues. Plus, what rations there were had to be cut due to the severe humanitarian issues and lack of humanitarian aid because of the war in Ukraine. As the World Food Program stated that they acquire 50% of their food from Ukrainian agricultural products. A little bit of good news. We finally have an update on one of our earliest stories here on the news channel. So one of the very first things we reported on happened on March 28th. And I believe we started reporting the very next day. I think it was our very first 24 hours of news and review. And yeah, I believe March 29th, our very first stream, I think we talked about this. There was a Nigerian train that was stopped by an IED. They went on, shot a bunch of people, and then kidnapped a ton of other people. The rest of the hostages have been freed. The remaining passengers taken hostage in March after gunmen bombed and attacked a train in northwest Nigeria have been freed. Gunmen blew up the tracks and attacked the train traveling between the capital, Abuja, and Kaduna, killing 8 people and kidnapping dozens in one of the most high-profile attacks this year. A team had secured the release and took custody of passengers held hostage by terrorists following the attack on Abuja and Kaduna train. The statement from a military committee said, without giving details on how they were freed. No group ever claimed responsibility for the March 28th attack, but many analysts believe it was the Islamic State militants. So that's pretty awesome to see. It's wonderful to finally get an update and see the closing of that story after so many months talking about it. It's good to see that those families and everyone are getting some closure onto that. And so that closes out the Nigerian train hostage situation. And in Brazil, Lula is projected to win. To be the winner of the Brazilian presidential election. Brazil's Lula, or Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has received 2 symbolic endorsements. The third and fourth place candidates said that they would vote for the former president in the runoff. Together, the 2 politicians received 7% of the votes in the country's first round. Analysts revealed by Reuters showed that Lula can defend Brazil. It can defend the Brazil election lead. This is getting reported by France 24.
It's a major boost for Brazil's leftist candidate Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. On Wednesday, Simone Tebet, who came in 3rd place after Lula and incumbent President Jair Bolsonaro, threw her weight behind the leftist icon.
Even if I maintain my criticism of candidate Lula, I repeat, I will vote for him because I recognize his commitment to democracy and to the Constitution, which I don't recognize in the current president.
Tibet is an anti-abortion Catholic, and her endorsement could help sway socially conservative and female voters. Lula also secured the backing of Ciro Gomes, who came in fourth place. His endorsement was more hesitant. He described his decision to back Lula as a last resort.
So we're seeing that there's a good possibility of an upset there. Once again, Lula can defend Brazil electionally with third parties. So that is an update regarding the election situation there in the nation of Brazil. So you jump up here into Haiti, and specifically coming out of Port-au-Prince. Updates on the cholera outbreak that we have already recently talked about. As of October the 6th, 11 cases and 4 fatalities have been confirmed, with 152 suspected cases, including 107 people which are hospitalized. We're undergoing investigation of various areas of the center and Oest departments. 1.2 million children are under threat of the greater Port-au-Prince area based on the Haitian Institute of Statistics. And out of Fort Myers, Florida, we are getting an update, or getting several updates regarding Hurricane Ian, which ravaged both Cuba, the Caribbean, and as well as Florida, striking there just at Fort Myers. Hurricane Ian, the number of the storm-related deaths so far has now increased to at least 101 as of the 6th. The Florida Medical Examiners Commission reported 92 deaths in Florida. 5 people were also killed in North Carolina, 3 in Cuba, and 1 in Virginia. Rescue efforts are still continuing. If you want to have more information, feel free to check out both the article on AP News and also Yahoo News. And coming out of the Bronx, 10 people were injured after a police car crashes and then jumps a curb. 10 people were hurt after a police car responding to a call clipped another car and went out of control and plowed into a group of people on the sidewalk. The collision was so hard that it took out a traffic pole. The fire department of New York says 4 people were rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries, including the man run over and a 5-year-old. And you can see that crash there, that crash scene. And that allows us to get into some of the interesting news of the night. And there's quite a bit interesting news for the night. So as we jump down here, this is in Washington, D.C., where NASA is going to be providing an update on DART. NASA will host a media briefing at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, or 1800 UTC, on Tuesday, October the 11th, to discuss the agency's double asteroid redirection test, or DART, mission, with its intentional collision with its target asteroid of Dimorphos. And this is the stream where they did impact. This is really cool to watch live, by the way. So this is the impact onto Dimorphos. But they will be releasing an update on the Dimorphos asteroid and on the DART mission on the 11th. So on our next stream, we will be sure to have an update for you guys. And off the coast of Virginia, a World War I German U-boat has been discovered by the U.S. Coast Guard. Off the coast, of the United States. A team of shipwreck hunters has discovered an extraordinarily sunken vessel off the east coast of the United States, the wreck of a World War I German U-boat sunk by U.S. warplanes a century ago for target practice. According to National Geographic, the team confirmed the identity of the wreck in early September as that is SMU-111, a submarine that served under the Imperial German Navy, or the Kaiserreich. After Germany agreed to an armistice in 1918, the U-boat was surrendered to the British, who gave the handful of early submarines to the United States to study and reverse engineer. In 1922, the U.S. Navy deliberately sank the vessel, but its exact location was not disclosed. The submarine U-111 was one of 5 German U-boats from World War I that were sunk in U.S. waters. There are also 8 from World War II, and it's the last to be rediscovered. And that is the conning tower of U-111. If you would like more, you can check out this article on Life Science. And now we get to jump over here where we jump into Stockholm, Sweden. Where here in Stockholm, we see that more Nobel Prize laureates have been announced. Nobel Prize in Literature was awarded to French author Annie Ernaux for the courage and clinical acuity with which she uncovers the roots, estrangements, and collective restraints of personal memory. So amazing to see. And that is the official page for her there. And also the Nobel Peace Prize, one of the most well-known of the Nobel Prizes, has been awarded today, or as of today. The 2022 Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to Ales Bialyatsky from Belarus, the Russian Human Rights Organization Memorial, and the Ukrainian Human Rights Organization Center for Civil Liberties. The Peace Prize laureates represent civil society in their home countries. They have for many years promoted the right to criticize power and protect the fundamental rights of citizens. They have made an outstanding effort to document war crimes, human rights abuses, and abuses of power. Together they demonstrate the significance of civil society for peace and democracy. We can see that here. Ukraine Centers for Civil Liberties also posted about this on their Twitter. And of course there's the Nobel Prizes there. The Russian Memorial in Moscow. And their Nobel Prize. And Belarusian Ales Bialyatsky. My understanding is that he is actually under arrest there in he's under arrest there in Belarus, from my understanding of the situation. So he's actually under arrest and is currently being detained by the Lukashenko regime. And that right there is all of the news in the world, at least that we are reporting on for the night. And so there has been a ton of stuff obviously ongoing, a lot of big news stories, and a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of crises too. There's been just an abhorrent amount of crises, and unfortunately a abhorrent amount of death and destruction there in many parts of the world, whether you're talking about Ethiopia, you're talking about Syria, you're talking about Pakistan, Thailand, or, of course, Ukraine. And so I hope that you guys can continue to support these people in really some very trying times. And so please be sure to check out the video description below and check out all of the different organizations we have listed in the description. These organizations, 8% or more of the donations that I receive all go to their programs, meaning they go to helping people. And so please, I implore you to check them all out. And if you have more, please get in touch with a staff member on our Discord. The link's also in the description. And we'll be more than happy to get to vetting all of those and hopefully getting them added to the stream. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, please give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. You can always help us grow this channel. The more people that come here and watch the news, the more of an impact we will have. So share, like, subscribe, hit that bell, let your friends know about us, share it amongst your communities. Once again, we want to grow the impact of this channel and hopefully do even more good throughout the world. And with that, I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. And if not, I do hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. And I hope that we will see you guys back once again tomorrow for a 24-hour of news and review. With that, my name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night, guys. Bye now.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлейфуйло. Тут для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бочок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your Top 11, shove it up your wrinkled bum. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.